Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts.
This episode is sponsored by Praxis. At its core, Praxis is a 9-month program for young people who want to accelerate their careers. It's a 3-month professional development bootcamp and a 6-month apprenticeship at a startup. But Praxis is so much more than just that core experience. It is a lifelong approach to self-directed learning and living, and an amazing community of participants, alumni, staff, and advisors supporting each other's goals and aspirations. We talked to fellow traveler and Praxis participant Lisa Miller about her favorite part of the Praxis experience, the community. Lisa has been living in Poland for 15 months and will be moving to the U.S. in December to start at her business partner. We asked Lisa to describe the Praxis community.
The Praxis community is actually my favorite thing ever about Praxis. I'm very vocal about this to everyone who reaches out to me. It's the main reason I applied even, because I had been connecting with some people outside of or inside the program while I was outside of the program before I had applied. And it seemed like every single person that I connected with and talked to and tweeted at or connected with on Facebook, they were so interesting and driven and creative and passionate and in different ways too. And so that's what pushed me into applying, because I was like, there's how many participants in the program right now? That means I get like 80 new driven, creative, amazing best friends. Like, sign me up. That sounds awesome. So that's my favorite thing about the program is our little community that's growing bigger and bigger.
So if you're a traveler who's looking for something more than the conventional approach to a career, and you want to meet a community of creative, inspiring, and driven people, go to discoverpraxis.com, schedule a call, and find out if the program is right for you.
This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by ITalkie. ITalkie is one of our favorite language learning platforms, and it allows you to learn a language from the comfort of your own home over the convenience of Skype. And you can sign up for a very low cost and connect with teachers around the world. So the great thing about iTalkie is that you get to meet a local from a country around the world who speaks that native language. So you really get to speak like a local as opposed to learning from an online program or from somebody who speaks the language well, but as a second language. If you're looking to learn a language before your next trip, you can sign up for our special promotion with iTalkie, where when you sign up for your first lesson, you'll get your second lesson free. You can visit www.theworldwanderers.com/italkie to find out more.
We are very excited to be joined today on the podcast by Blake Boles. Blake is the founder of Unschool Adventures. He is the author of multiple books, including his most recent one, How to Live Nowhere. Super experienced traveler, nomad. We've got a ton of stuff to talk to Blake about. So welcome to the podcast, Blake.
Thanks, Ryan. Hello, Amanda.
So we've got a bunch of stuff we want to talk about, but we figured first off, we should just pinpoint your location since we know you're always on the move. Where in the world are you right now?
I'm in a very exciting place, Connecticut. Back here visiting family for the holidays, but I'll soon be in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then Colombia, and then Argentina. So that's just my next 4 months.
And you're headed down to Argentina for your next Unschool adventure trip, right?
Yeah, I'm taking a group of about 16 young people. They're gap year age, so 18 to 20. And we are going to spend 3 months living in Buenos Aires. I've rented them group apartments on Airbnb. I've got my own apartment. So it's sort of like a college study abroad semester, except that there's no mandatory studying outside of a few Spanish classes.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
Yeah. It sounds like something we should be on.
Yeah. Might be a little too old for that.
Yeah, so what is Unschool Adventures like overall?
Sure. Well, it's an excuse for me to travel and get paid for it. That's your first order answer right there. It's probably the biggest travel company that's out there for teenage unschoolers and homeschoolers and other self-directed learners, anyone who is sort of alternatively educated and who is not bound to a regular academic calendar. So almost all the trips that I've run have been during the school year, and usually they're longer. So 6 to 8 weeks. If it's an international trip, this Argentina semester is 12 weeks. That's our longest one yet. And the participants get a lot more freedom and have a lot more personal responsibility than the average young person gets on an organized trip like this.
So for the Argentina trip, for example, like what kind of stuff happens day to day for people on the trip?
Yeah, I love answering that question because it's really simple. And the answer is, I have no idea, or I have very little idea, because the idea is that we're bringing them there for them to create their own experiences. And so when I'm contributing to this equation, because they could just go do this themselves if they wanted to, but a lot of them are not quite ready yet for independent solo world travel. And a lot of them want to be doing this with a group of other young people, their peers, who understand them, who share their values and motivations. And so I bring together the group. I sort of set the stage, give them the ground rules, set up some of the stuff like, where we're going to be staying. But beyond that, on a more day-to-day basis, they have a lot of latitude to choose what they do or how they spend their time. And so just, again, with this Argentina semester, I'm encouraging them to bring projects. So this could be like video projects, writing projects, things that they purposefully want to achieve in their time there. And then when they get there, I'll be like, all right, you brought these ideas, why don't we start working on these? And if some of them are like, yeah, my video project, I'm so excited for that, let's make that happen, I'll be like, fantastic, how can I help? I help facilitate the process. And if another one says, man, I was so excited about this writing project, and now I have zero motivation for it, then I also facilitate that. And I say, well, okay, what was your original, what got you excited for this in the first place? And if we kind of realize that they had maybe a false presumption about what they wanted to do, or they really weren't prepared for it, then I help them direct their focus in a different area. And really, my primary purpose is going to be telling them to go make friends in Argentina who are local friends. I think that's the only way that you really learn the language, is if you go out and you try to make local friends. And so those are some of the things that we'll be doing and that I'll be doing.
Yeah, that sounds like such an amazing experience for a young person to have. I'm curious where you got the idea to create Unschool Adventures.
Yeah, well, I wasn't raised alternatively educated myself. I went to California public schools. And in college, I got turned on to these ideas behind alternative education and self-directed learning. And this really big idea, which is that school and learning are two different things. And that you don't necessarily need a curriculum. You don't need somebody there showing you the way, kind of planning everything out for you in order for deep learning to happen. And when I discovered that people will, have entire lives as unschoolers. And what that means is they have entire lives where they are choosing what they're focusing on each day. They're choosing their priorities. It's not even one of these situations, if you're young, it's not even a situation where mom and dad are like, okay, we want you to learn math and science and English, but then the rest of the day is yours. A lot of homeschoolers do that, but a lot of these unschoolers who I work with don't have any formal requirements whatsoever. And so it's this sort of extreme end of personal freedom in education. And I found that really compelling, really interesting. It's certainly not a golden bullet. It's not something that everyone can do or should do. But the young people who do choose this path, I find it really fascinating. I love working with them. It parallels the entrepreneurial path that I've been interested in for a long time, that I've been taking. So that's what keeps me in this game. It's when somebody has a totally blank canvas on which to paint their life, their career, their education. There are so many possibilities that I'm just constantly amazed and enthralled by working with them.
Awesome. How does travel play into that for the education experience? Like, what do you see changing in people when they go out of the U.S. for the first time and get somewhere like Argentina and start to interact with a different culture?
They definitely gain a few pounds. And I think that's for all the right reasons. Media lunas, gelato,
empanadas,
plentiful empanadas, many good reasons to gain those pounds. But beyond that, I think travel is something that has real boundaries, in the same way that like going on a backpacking trip in the woods has real boundaries. And what a lot of young people have not really experienced in their lives are real boundaries. The kind of situation where if you push, it will push back. And so this is not an argument for sending everyone to a military boot camp or something like that. But when you spend so much time in traditional education, you're in this kind of world that we have created where, we have these threats and these bribes. We have, our grades, getting an A is good, getting an F is bad, but really you're the same person at the end of the day, no matter what your grades are. And you compare that to something like a backpacking trip, where if you go backpacking and you are well prepared, then you will enjoy your time. And if you are not well prepared, like, you might freeze, you might go hungry, you might get attacked by an animal. And so in the same way, when we go out traveling for the first time, when we leave the comforts and security of home and our known culture, then there are actual consequences that can take place. Again, I'm not saying airdrop kids into Afghanistan or something, but going someplace that's an appropriate level of challenge for you as a young person. That's why I love Argentina. Actually, it's far away, it's exotic, it's got a language barrier, but at the same time, it's one of the most European countries in South America, and it's fundamentally really safe. If you go to a big city there, you'll have the same safety challenges that you have in any other big city, no matter what country you're in the world. But it's a good level of challenge for a first-time traveler. And that means I can let these young people, as young as 15, go out and wander around a place like Buenos Aires or Mendoza or another big city. And, again, with some simple ground rules, with a few things like, here's your cell phone, make sure you take it with you, call me if anything's wrong. Then they can go and have this independent experience that they feel like they have ownership over, but also they know that they could screw it up. Also, they could get on the subway going the wrong direction, which has happened. They can, lose their little piece of paper that tells them what their home address is. That's happened. And so, as you two know, as longtime travelers, there are all these little situations that stress you out, but that challenge you and make you grow. And I think that's why everyone wants to travel to some degree. It's just this natural human learning experience. It's a natural adventure. And that's why I think it's just so fun and easy to take groups of young people traveling, because it's something they all want to do anyways. And so you're not in a coercive situation like in many traditional education situations.
Yeah, there's no element of like the kid who's not excited to be there. Like, oh, my parents sent me to Buenos Aires for 12 weeks.
Yeah, that'd be a pretty entitled kid, first of all.
Worst parents ever.
But I remember going on like a high school field trip, for maybe a middle school field trip, and there were lots of kids who didn't want to be there, and they made the lives of the trip leaders pure hell, right? Because if you have a kid who doesn't want to be there and you're taking them around Washington, D.C. or something, they're just going to go sneak off and smoke pot behind the Lincoln Memorial or something. Like, that's not what I want to deal with, and not what I have to deal with in my Unschool Adventures trips.
Yeah. Do you notice a difference between unschool teenagers and teenagers who come from like a traditional schooling background?
Yes, but not as much as many people think. Like, they are still just teenagers, and I think that their behaviors are more representative of their family situations and their income levels and all those more broader demographics. But yeah, there is a difference. A big one that a lot of people notice is that young people who grow up unschooled, or again, living and learning in these situations that are not coercive, but are more opt-in, is that they treat adults like adults. If you have an eighth grader, an average eighth grader, they think of an adult, and I'm talking about a stranger adult, not necessarily their parents here, but they think of an adult as sort of an authority figure and something to be wary of. And I don't blame them. But when you work with young people who haven't been in those more coercive relationships, then they just look you straight in the eye and they talk to you as if you're a human being. It's very nice. They're also kind of weirdly independent and weirdly creative. For example, at one point a few years ago, I work at this summer camp called Not Back to School Camp, which is the kind of biggest summer camp out there for teenage unschoolers. They come from all over the U.S. and Canada, and they go to Not Back to School Camp for 1 or 2 weeks. They have sessions in Oregon and Vermont. And at some point a few years ago, teenagers from Not Back to School Camp started taking my head, which they got from Facebook photos, and they photoshopped it out, and they started photoshopping my head onto other images, kind of creating really weird, disturbing memes. And you can browse these by going to facebook.com/Blake Club.
Oh my
and
gosh.
so I have a Blake Club. It's really weird and disturbing and kind of entertaining when I'm not disturbed. And so that's the kind of stuff that happens with unschoolers a little bit more often than regular teenagers.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you say that, because there's a very strange parallel that's happened within Praxis, where there's obviously a lot of unschoolers and homeschoolers in the group, and they've created a Praxis dank meme stash where they've just been memeing all of the Praxis staff members and other people involved in Praxis in this separate Facebook group.
It's really, really interesting.
Well, I'm happy for you.
Yeah. Unschoolers are just born to meme. So one thing that I think you're a really good example of is finding a way to combine travel with also making a good income. What were the kind of origins of, I guess the question is when did you start thinking about how can I make travel something that I do more than just as a break from real life? And then what were the steps you took to kind of turn that into reality?
Yeah, I got some opportunities to travel when I was pretty young, spending a month abroad in Chile at age 14, doing a homestay and doing the little traditional Western European backpacking circuit with high school friends when I was 19. But the really big turning point was running away to South America for 3 months when I was 24 and having one of my various quarter life crises take place.
What had you been doing
there
before? In the 21 to 24 range?
Yeah, right after college, I was working in outdoor education. And so I was taking mostly groups of 5th and 6th graders hiking and teaching them some natural science. And out in California, there's a really robust market for outdoor education. It's actually required by the public school system that every young person does a week of outdoor ed.
Oh, wow.
And so there's a lot of opportunities for recent college graduates who want to work in the outdoors. They want to work with kids, but not necessarily want to go into the more traditional teaching route. And so I spent a few years doing that. And I also worked at summer camps each summer. And so really I had summer camp almost year round. It's a very camp type environment when you work in outdoor ed. So that was working in the outdoors with kids, but that wasn't quite traveling yet. And so I actually got really frustrated with working in outdoor ed because the turnover was so high. You get a group and 3 days later or 5 days later, after you've just started to build up some rapport with them, then they leave and you get another group coming in. And so that's why I ran away to South America. And I spent 3 months kind of going down the Gringo Trail from Ecuador to Argentina. And a few friends joined me along the way. And it was a fantastic experience. And so when I got back, I started looking at trip leader positions for gap year companies. And I'd never gone on a gap year myself, but I knew that they existed. And there was this one company that I was really sure I was going to get a job with, a 3-month gap semester trip leader for a South America program. And I went through all the motions, got through all the stages of interview, and at the very last moment, I was told that I did not get the job. There was 150 applicants who had applied for it, and only 2 spaces available. And this was 2008. A lot of people were kind of starting to feel the pressure of the recession, and this type of job was really appealing for a lot of recent graduates. So I thought I could just keep trying to apply to jobs in this sphere, but I noticed that all these teenagers who I worked with at Not Back to School Camp were often devastated when Not Back to School Camp ended because they would then go back to far-flung places across North America, and it would be a long time before they'd get to hang out with their camp friends again. So it's a little bit different from a regular summer camp where maybe you get a lot of kids coming from the same local geography or the same school. These ones form really deep connections, and then they go way far away from each other. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, I've got this background in outdoor education. I've got safety certifications that are relevant, like wilderness first responder. I was an EMT at that time. And I said, I almost got hired for this company. So why don't I just put this all together and see if I can take a group of teenage unschoolers to Argentina, because that's really where I wanted to go back to. That's where I fell in love. I fell in love with the country. I'm very attracted to Argentine women also, just for the record. But they will not give me the time of day. I'm just like, it's a total mismatch. So I wanted to go back to Argentina. I noticed that these teenagers wanted more opportunities to connect and spend time with each other. And I offered a trip along with a co-leader from Not Back to School Camp to Argentina for 6 weeks. We wanted $3,500 for it. And our goal was to get 10 signups, and we got 9 signups. And so it was a company that cost almost nothing to create. I coded the initial website by hand. And I got connected actually through that company that I got denied working for. I got connected to a lot of resources, like, for example, the legal forms that you need to kind of do this kind of trip and not just make it completely ad hoc. And so it was a very bootstrapped business, but it was profitable. However small the profit was, it was profitable from the very beginning. And from that was 2008. And so that was 8 years ago. And I've been running trips each year. Sometimes it's only 1 trip a year, and sometimes it's up to 3. And I'm on most of the trips myself. I haven't wanted to expand this into some sort of bigger operation where I'm just running the office and training people and letting everyone else have a good time go off traveling. No, thank you. I would like to continue traveling. And also, I don't think that the market can necessarily bear it. It's just a really small niche thing to work with teenage homeschoolers and unschoolers. And I've offered trips before that I think many people are interested in, but there's just not enough applicants. And so I have to cancel them because they won't be financially viable. And so I've enjoyed keeping this as a very small scale operation, and I continue to be motivated to go to new and different places each year. For example, this next year, I'm going to try to take a group, if there's enough applicants, to Southeast Asia, where I've never been myself. But I feel super confident that I can run a trip there successfully because it's so tourist populated. It's so well documented. I've talked with lots of people who have been there before. So I get to travel to new places also.
What are some of the things you look for in a destination that make you think, oh, this would be a good learning environment for unschoolers and homeschoolers?
Yeah, and just one quick note on that terminology. I don't actually look for good learning environments. I don't even like using the word learning when we're talking about these trips, because I like to just say we're traveling. You're learning how to travel independently. We're doing it with a group, because as we were talking about before, it's a de facto learning experience. It's a very deep learning experience. And really, teenagers don't want to go somewhere and go learn something. That makes them think that I'm going to take them to Southeast Asia and then we're going to spend all day, reading history books there. We'll learn some history, but I think that, the lesson here for learning and for education is that, you need to have a context for what you want to learn first. I think of when I got to go to Chile at age 14 and spend a month, doing that homestay. And I had very little Spanish experience. I had 1 year of high school Spanish, had the present tense down essentially. And so I made all sorts of errors and mistakes and had lots of difficult situations using Spanish in that month. But when I came back from that trip, I was like, Spanish is awesome because it lets me communicate with strangers. And I get to go into this whole different culture and I'm not helpless. And so I went back to high school and I had 3 more years of high school Spanish, and I soaked that up like a sponge. I was very, very focused in that Spanish, and that formed a foundation of Spanish that I still have today. Whereas most people who take 4 years of high school Spanish, you ask them to say something in Spanish a year or 2 after that, and they just look at you like, shrugging their shoulders, lo siento. And so I think, if we went to Southeast Asia, if we saw some things that had to do with like the Cambodian genocide or the Vietnam War, then that provides the context for what we later call learning in the sense of like academic learning. But I try to shy away from using that word learning because it makes it sound like we're going to go and not have fun. But we're just going to go and travel and do stuff that independent travelers like backpackers in their early 20s. We're going to do what those people do, except together as a group. So that being said, I like to go to places that are in the middle of the income range. I don't want to go to like super destitute countries, and I don't want to go to super developed, super expensive like Scandinavian countries. I want to go to places that have good tourist infrastructure, but don't have a set of expectations about what you should do with your time. So, for example, if I take a group of teenagers to Paris and I say, we're going to do lots of cool stuff, but we're not going to the Eiffel Tower or the Louvre, then, people would be up in arms. Parents would, call me like, well, are you mad? Why would you not do these things? You have to do X, Y, Z. Just like if you go to Rome, you have to do X, Y, Z. If you go to San Francisco, you have to do X, Y, Z. But if you take young people to Argentina, you say, yeah, we're going to Cordoba, Argentina. They're like, I have no idea what that is. So have a great time. The expectation level suddenly drops to zero or very close to zero. They say like, go eat a steak, dance tango. I say, okay, I'll do both of those things. And so a good balance of safety, exoticness, and price, I think, makes a good teenage trip. Especially the safety part. You need to be able to let teenagers roam freely in a medium to large size city without fearing for their safety. So I'm not going to take them to like Cairo right now. But I will take them to big cities in South America, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. I would go to Europe if it, didn't meet or didn't fail the price tests and the expectation tests.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. To your point of like the Spanish learning or the unlearning while you're traveling, like Ryan and I were definitely those two people who studied Spanish for like 4 years in high school, had absolutely no need to it in small towns in Canada, and then went to Spain for the first time. And I'm like, what did I learn in that Spanish class? I was like, I think pollo might be chicken. I think I like chicken. Okay, I'll get that to eat. And just like cursing myself for not taking it in, but I had no real reason to learn it other than for tests at that point.
Yeah, and it's hard because, you think you want to prepare for a trip before you go on the trip. I'm going to learn Spanish before I go to the Spanish-speaking country. But then, as I think most people realize, you get to the Spanish-speaking country, and that is that's what becomes your foundation. I'm sure it was easier for you, Amanda, because you had all those years of Spanish before you went to Spain, so you were able to pick it up more quickly. But I think that the question here is like return on investment. Like, how much time does somebody need to spend in a Spanish class where they're bored and they have no context and they're learning very slowly and inefficiently? You can spend 4 years there and learn the amount of Spanish that you might pick up in 4 months actually living in Spain and trying to work and make friends.
Totally.
Yeah, I might even go as low as like 4 weeks from what I saw in my Spanish class. Yeah, it's all about like once you have kind of like a real incentive, then you can just like take off and something to kind of like test the methods you're using instead of just going kind of blind and not knowing if this is actually going to work in reality like you are in a classroom.
That's right.
Do you want to dive into kind of your lifestyle and living nomadically?
Sure. What do you want to know?
When you were young, like at what point did you think like, you know what, I really just don't want to like settle down anywhere? And where do you think it came from that you ended up in that lifestyle?
I think working in summer camps and working in outdoor education right after college definitely planted the seed because it's a very seasonal existence. You work for 3 to 4 months and then you move along somewhere else. And so I would be living 2 or 3 or 4 different places each year right after college. And then going to South America and realizing that I could just kind of bum around between different countries and locations for a pretty low cost was a pretty big eye opener too. So I didn't start, super young thinking, man, I don't want to live anywhere. I want to live nowhere. But it sort of grew organically out of just wanting to pursue all these different cool opportunities and realizing that if I was paying rent somewhere, then I wasn't going to have enough money to do all the cool stuff that I wanted. And just to give one more shout out to summer camp culture, I think getting to work with other instructors, other staff members at these summer camps, and them coming from all over the U.S. and from all over the world gave me a reason to go out and visit those people and to just keep moving around. Because if you have somebody who's a friend in Switzerland, and says, come out and visit with me, then it's so easy to do it. So much easier than just planning your own solo trip to Switzerland. And so I think I have a big debt of gratitude to the summer camps where I've worked for kind of providing this more global network. And, but to go beyond that, I just feel like I have a weird lust for novelty. And I don't think this is necessarily a healthy thing. I think that there's lots of upsides and there's a lot of downsides to this kind of wanderlust. And it's something that makes relationships, and not just romantic relationships, but, personal relationships, keeping up with friends and family, having this sense of community that I think most people get from having a job in one place. It makes all those things very difficult. And I think relationships are ultimately what make us most happy. And so, you two seem to have nailed it. You're traveling together. Congratulations. I think just wanting to see someplace new every few months, want to wake up to a different horizon, wanting to, feel this different, sense of, like humidity on my skin. Mm-hmm. I think that this is just something that I realized is built into me. It emerged slowly. It emerged in the post-college years. And it just also has not made sense for me economically to stop moving around. I get to be a speaker for this realm of alternative education. And that's actually one of the reasons I'm out in the East Coast right now. I gave a talk in Boston. I'm giving a talk in Philadelphia. And so it's helpful to my career to move around and meet lots of different people and go to conferences. And then, if you run a trip to Argentina, then you run a trip to Southeast Asia, again, it does not make any sense to get a 12-month lease. I'm 34 now, and the longest lease I've had recently is 5 months long. And even that felt like some sort of deep commitment. And, like I was wringing my hands nervously about, should I sign this or not? So I hope that gives you some perspective.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And to your point about like traveling and keeping in touch with friends, it's definitely like, it's amazing that we have each other to travel with, obviously, but it's something that we've thought about, in our current situation as well as in our future, like finding a community if we continue to be on the move and, meeting cool people all over the world, but then having them be so far from us. How do you sort of keep community in your life when you move around a ton or you don't have one home?
Yeah, I actually sat down in January and wrote about this question because it's pretty significant. And I was wondering whether I should keep doing this traveling thing or not. And what emerged was this kind of really long form essay that I called How to Live Nowhere. And I published it for free online. And so you can read the complete thoughts on howtolivenowhere.com. But the summary is, I think that one of the cool advantages for maintaining relationships, maintaining the sense of community, is that when I do visit people, it's a pretty intense kind of we can't waste any time experience. Mm-hmm. If you only see a close friend twice a year, then when you get to spend 3 days with him, then you're going to hang out a lot together. You're going to catch up. And you're probably not going to fall into these more habitual ruts that I think a lot of friends or family members or people in relationships do fall into, which, it's like just coming home at night and watching Netflix together. And like, that's really nice too. Like, I like doing that with people, but it's just not that same quality of connection. So the flip side of that is that it's very frenetic. If you're just hopping between visiting, catching up with all these different friends and having these intense experiences, it can be draining, and also can feel like what's Groundhog Day? It's like Groundhog Day when you're going in. Every person you meet, you're sort of catching up with them from the past year, and you're just telling them what you've been up to and what you're doing, and you don't get into that nice stable equilibrium point where you're just hanging out. You're like, you want to go for a walk? Yes. There's something really nice about that too. So I definitely have not figured it out. I think I found some good coping mechanisms. I don't think that anyone ends up traveling forever. I don't think that there are very many people out there who really stay happy doing the permanent nomad thing, that we all settle down eventually. And maybe we settle down, then we pick up again for a few years, and then we settle back down again. But eventually, we all become, mobility impaired to some extent. And we have to just like stop and be somewhere, and you want to have a community there. And so I don't see this as some sort of like digital nomad or world traveler versus, those poor people who have to stay in one place 12 months out of the year. I don't think it's that. I just think that for myself, if I don't fully take advantage of this period of freedom that I have, of physical mobility, of, having this location independent or location flexible job that allows me to just pick up and move every few months. If I don't take advantage of this right now, then I'm going to regret that later. I feel very strongly that that's true.
Yeah. And it's a cool experience too. That's kind of something like new in a lot of ways because of technology. You can really live anywhere. So it's like, just like you said, just a cool experience to have. And it's not something you have to think like it's a fork in the road and there's no coming back. Like I can never settle in a city because I've chosen to spend 4 or 5, 10 years moving around from place to place.
Yeah. And moving around, I think, will help you make a better informed decision about where you do want to settle down.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty obvious investment right there. And if you spend time living in different countries, different cultures, big cities, small towns, rural areas, then instead of just saying, well, I grew up here, so I guess I should live here. Or instead of saying, well, I got my best job offer is in this city, so I guess I should live there. You can, have a more nuanced view of what makes you happy and what sustains you. So you don't end up somewhere that you end up hating, 10 or 15 years later.
Yeah. And almost just to exercise that voice in your head that's like, this would be better if I was somewhere else. Like you kind of learn that no matter where you are, there's going to be certain things that are following you around. And almost there's a value in travel too, just to know that like travel's not going to solve all your problems. Like the person who's working a corporate job for 40 years thinking like, oh, I just should have gone out and done it. That would have been that would have been the key, but just going out and doing it, then you realize, okay, this isn't necessarily the key.
Yeah. It's not that special. Travel is not some sort of magical, thing that makes you happier. And as you said, it's not about like, oh, my problems won't exist when I'm over there. Travel makes you realize that you bring your problems with you. Like you are the problem, your beliefs and your habits locked up in your brain. That's the problem. So I think it can help you focus on you and work on yourself instead of imagining that the solutions to life's problems are on a beach in Thailand or on a working farm in Argentina, because that's just not true.
Yeah, it kind of makes you like face the things that you can avoid in day-to-day life. If you're like busy with work and your social life and buying material goods and that sort of thing, all of a sudden you don't have those and you're like, oh shit.
Yeah, speaking of material goods, we're recording on Black Friday here in the US. So biggest shopping day of the year. And I was thinking this morning, I was like, maybe there's some cool Black Friday deals. I should buy something right now since everything's really cheap.
Yeah.
And I could not think of one thing that I wanted to buy because it just won't fit into my luggage.
Yeah.
I'm trying to live out of a carry-on in 2017. And so I'm just like maxed out already. And so I love having that negative incentive to continue accumulating stuff because I feel that pull to just buy something because it makes me feel better. It makes me feel like I'm accomplished. So another little positive probing thing that travel does.
Yeah, where you feel like the real cost of the space, where you're like, exactly what's in your bag, and you're like, well, if I want to buy this, other things have to go.
Yeah, I mean, I just had that sort of, I really do like to shop, and I look at stuff and I'm like, oh, that would be so nice in my wardrobe, or, oh, that would be really nice in, this room, not that we have a place anymore to furnish or decorate, but we just went to a Marks and Spencer, probably like 2 or 3 hours ago. They had all these nice like Christmas sweaters and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, that would be so cute.
Yeah, and it's really cold in Shanghai.
Yeah, it's really cold. So there's context for that. But I'm like, oh, that'd be so nice. And then I'm like, oh, I really don't have any space in my bag and I don't want to haul that on my back.
Yeah, it forces you to choose good style, at least. If you're only going to carry 6 t-shirts around, then you better look damn good in them.
So do you have like a place where you store belongings, or is what you carry around with you all you own?
That would be really cool to say, but that's not true. I have a very luxurious 5-foot by 10-foot storage unit in Carson City, Nevada, which I pay $35 a month for. So that's where a lot of my stuff sits. And I'm not doing very well on the live out of a backpack dream quite yet.
That's okay. We're not there either.
What are like the key items in the carry-on bag? What are your essential things for travel?
I've got nothing special here. It's clothing, laptop. I think the one thing that I'm trying to bring along nowadays that I didn't before is some podcasting gear.
Yeah.
I just ordered a more mobile mic instead of the bulkier one that I have for doing my own podcast. But otherwise, that's it. If I've got running shoes, if I've got a frisbee, then those are things that will keep me happy no matter where I am. And all of that stuff, clothing, laptop, frisbee, they tend to fit into a small backpack.
A frisbee is an interesting one. I don't think I've heard that before.
Frisbees are the best. $10 and unlimited fun, completely cross-cultural. You know, it's an easy thing to teach to people. You bring it to a park, you start throwing with somebody, you know, somebody else looks at you and they kind of give you this look like, I'd love to be doing that. And you're like, here's how you throw a frisbee. And all of a sudden you got a little group of friends there. Just don't make the mistake that I did when I took one of my first groups to Argentina, and I was still a little rusty on my vocabulary, and I learned Mexican Spanish when I grew up in Southern California.
Yeah.
And so I learned the word to catch is coger, C-O-G-E-R.
Yeah.
And then, so I'm down in this park in Argentina, and there's this boy looking at me. He's like 11 years old. He obviously wants to play frisbee. So I'm showing him. It's like, here's how you tira. Here's how you throw the frisbee. And then I said, here's how you coge el frisbee. And this kid just looks at me wide-eyed, and I'm like, what's going on? And I realized later that I'm telling him to fuck the frisbee. So I'm just this like 20-something-year-old white dude here telling this 11-year-old boy to fuck a frisbee in a park. I didn't end up in jail for that one.
The next day on the news, there's a predator in the park.
Yeah, that's right. Un predator. Muy serio. One other thing I just remembered that I love to bring, which is kind of like a frisbee, but the game Set is this little card game where you have different colored shapes and symbols. There's no numbers. There's no language on it. And it's just a fun card game. It's a fast-paced game where you try to get sets of 3 cards. It's like a mind bender type game. And that's another super easy, lightweight, cheap, cross-cultural thing that I love to bring because playing games is how I make friends with people. It's just the easiest way to do it. And so if I've got this little card game, and it's also something that you can play in like a cafe, and if you play it with a friend, other people will look at it and be like, what's that weird game that they're playing with colors and shapes? And so anything you can do publicly and then draw in other people to form these little connections, I'm a fan of.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that. And so do you have a place that you call home?
No, I don't.
Cool. So it's just wherever you're kind of located in the moment is sort of like becomes home because you're there?
Yeah, I think that's right. I feel a definite sense of allegiance to the West Coast USA and to the mountains in the Western US, whether that's Colorado or California or other places. That's where I feel most at home. And so, for example, the last 2 summers, when I had that 5-month rental, I was in South Lake Tahoe, California. And Lake Tahoe is just this gorgeous place, you know, giant lake ringed by mountains. And so I like to go hiking and trail running and swimming. I've got a few friends who live there. And I went to one of those summer camps where I went is nearby in the mountains. And so I'm kind of a little surrogate community there. So that's the closest thing that I've got to home. And I do have family that's near San Francisco and out here near New Haven in Connecticut.
Okay. And then what's your preferred like accommodation to stay in when you're traveling around a bunch?
Well, it's a hard question to answer. When I'm with a group, I'm typically staying with the group. And so we'll stay in like hostels, but we'll rent out entire hostel rooms. And so we essentially have our own private hostel rooms. But when I'm doing my own thing, I think it's pretty standard Airbnb or home away for shorter term stuff. I use couchsurfing a lot. No, that's not a long-term solution, but I use it whenever I can, and it's never failed me. And I got a chance to be a host these past 2 summers, which felt really good too.
Yeah, that's something that we did while we were living down in Atlanta, and we had never done couchsurfing at all before. And it was so fun to meet people from around the world. Like we had a couple Americans stay with us, and we also met like 2 girls from Kazakhstan who are now like friends on Facebook with. It's super cool.
Yeah. We found like almost that the hosting experience was almost like better than the couch surfing experience. They're both like good experiences, but it was just really fun hosting people. Like a really good way to break up kind of the week, to have someone come in and stay, someone who's from Kazakhstan, for example. You get to ask a lot of questions about what life is like there, and just kind of, it's super valuable, even though you're providing value to someone else.
And I just love the model of couch surfing. And I think it goes along with the model of like work away or help exchange or woofing, just coming and staying for free and essentially sharing your story and maybe sharing a meal, or in the case of work away or help exchange, sharing some labor in exchange for food. And I just have this vision of my future life, wherever I end up living, whether it's a 12 months out of the year thing or still a migrating thing. I want to have a place where I can host other people that are from all over the world who can come and stay for anywhere from a few days to maybe a few weeks, and who can bring their culture and their experiences in and share it with me and the other people in my life. That just feels like such a sustainable path for, again, meeting those needs for community and for connection and relationships, which are so basic to us. And the idea of just, I don't know, if somebody, gave me $1 million and they said, all right, you're going to stop being a bum, like go buy a house somewhere. And the idea of just, choosing a house somewhere, but then living the more traditional kind of isolated nuclear family lifestyle without bringing people into that, it's just really unappealing to me. So maybe that's another part of why I keep traveling. I just want to continue to have these connections. And if I don't have a place where I can bring people to me yet, then I'm going to continue to be the one who goes out and forms those connections and stays with the other people.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. I think that it's nice to like open your home to other people and like kind of give back and create community that way.
I'm curious if you've kind of seen a change in the way you think about travel from just observing all of these unschoolers traveling for the first time.
That's a good question. I haven't been asked that before. I like traveling with first-time travelers because it keeps that sense of newness and just that sparkle in the eye that, being around that is a very infectious thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I find that for myself, when I'm traveling solo, it's easy for me to just get into my routine of, here's my routine. I show up somewhere. I'm like, okay, where's the best coffee shop in the area? Found it. Great. Go there, do my computer thing in the morning, maybe go hike around a little bit in the afternoon. And that's my schedule. But when I'm with these teenagers, they are always looking for new opportunities. And sometimes it's stuff that I kind of roll my eyes at because it's more touristy stuff. And sometimes it's stuff that's way out there, like finding some sort of, in Buenos Aires, there's apparently this really famous amusement park that is Christian themed. It's like, it might be one of the largest Christian themed amusement parks in the world. It's like Jesus Land. And a couple of my, in 2014, a group that I was taking there, a couple of the participants wanted to go there, and I didn't go with them, but I said, I had no idea that this existed. And I read about it on Wikipedia a bit, and I thought, man, and so just being able to help them get there and then come back and they told me the stories, and there were some weird stories that happened in that place. I think I need to go back there. That keeps it fresh for me. That's nice.
So what was Jesus Land like, or whatever it was actually called?
I'm blanking on the details right now, but maybe just Google, Jesus Amusement Park, Buenos Aires, and
that definitely
you'll get a sense of it.
Come up for us when we were looking at things to do in Buenos Aires.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's nice to have a group of first-time travelers around you. They keep your eyes open.
Yeah, and almost like you kind of get to crowdsource some like novel activities because there's a bunch of people who are all have their own kind of unique interests, and then you kind of get to hear about like, oh, this person wants to go over there. Like I've never heard of anyone who wanted to do that before.
Yeah, and that's another benefit of traveling with a multi-age group. I feel like if I just travel with someone who's essentially my same stage of life, then we'll go to bars, we'll do all these things that people our age can do. But when you're traveling with much older people, when you're traveling with much younger people, especially young children, then your perspective on where you're going and what you can do there changes. So I like that.
Have you thought much about doing similar trips with different, like obviously you have different age groups in terms of the teenage years, but like even older age groups or even younger age groups on the other end?
Well, probably not younger.
Yeah.
I really like doing longer trips and trips to really far away destinations, and that just kind of doesn't work for people who are younger than 13. Or maybe that's a false assumption. If I'll take a group of 11-year-olds, just email me. And for older trips, I get a lot of parents of the teenagers who I work with saying, I'd love to go on one of these trips. When are you leading the Unschool Adventures parent trip? And then I respond, do you have 7 weeks to go to a foreign country? They're like, no, I don't have 7 weeks.
Right.
It's like I have 1 or 2 weeks. And I'm like, well, that length of trip just doesn't interest me as much. There's something about only traveling for a week or two where for the first 4 days, your mind is still at home. And for the last 4 days, your mind is already back at home. Mm-hmm. And that leaves very little time in between. I like the deeper immersion experiences. And also there's so many trips out there for older people already. And again, as far as I know, I think there's maybe one other company that runs trips for teenagers during the school year. And so it's just nice having this little niche. And I just don't feel like I need to go beyond it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I think it's really cool. Like when I was reading about you and listening to the podcast that you did with Jason on Zero to Travel, how your passion is really teenagers, because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't even know if I want to have children because teenagers are terrible. And, they're just like people going through what we all went through as teenagers. And it's kind of like a difficult time in your life. And to have somebody who's
definitely
rooting for you is pretty cool.
At the same summer camp where I went as a kid and where I worked a little bit through college, they had this teen leadership program, and it was for 15 to 17-year-olds, and it's 4 weeks long, very intensive, both mentally challenging and physically challenging. And I just saw such incredible transformation there, and I realized that there's this golden window in between the time where a kid can really kind of take care of themselves and wipe their own butts and do something like go to summer camp or travel internationally, which I think starts around age 13. And then I think there's a window that closes around age 19 or 20, which is when our social beliefs about the world, how the world works, how we work, our relation to it, tend to start crystallizing and hardening. And so, it kind of sounds like I'm just rooting for shaping teenagers, in whatever belief system I believe to be true. And maybe that's true. I shouldn't discount that. I'm just manipulating teenagers in the way that I see fit. That's the window that I'm talking about here. But I want to put a positive spin on it. I think that you can make a lot of a positive difference in a young person's life during the middle to late teenage years. And I think that for me, like I'm well suited to that age range and that development stage. Sense of humor, for example, like I love sensitive humor that are more dark and sarcastic and witty and like taken like national, like the election that just happened. Like if you can have a sense of humor about the election that just happened in the U.S., then I'm a fan. And that's something that younger kids are not so good at, but teenagers are. And so I can connect with them on that level. And so because there's this big opportunity window and because I feel like I can personally build rapport with teenagers better than other age groups, I think that's why I've stuck around.
Yeah, and it seems like an age too where people are just a lot more open to experience. I guess because of the crystallization
completely.
later on, but
Yeah, open to experience, and also working with teenage unschoolers, they're also not operating on this set of assumptions about success, which comes with being part of the traditional school system. And so unfortunately, there's this great opportunity window, and there's this open-mindedness that's inherent to teenagers, but so many of them are just caught up on the college prep treadmill. Mm-hmm. And especially if you're going to a more competitive school, you just have so little free time today as a young person. It's sad to me, how, young people's attention is completely focused on academic schoolwork, on homework, on projects, on, puffing up your college applications. And I'm not saying that those things are not important. I'm just saying that, again, it's kind of like, the time we invest in language learning in classes versus what you could be, the speed at which you could be learning by just going into an immersion situation. I feel like there's a lot of lost opportunities that are happening when we say that in order for a young person to be exposed to science, they should take an entire year of chemistry. Really, do you need an entire year? Couldn't we just do like a 3-week intensive in chemistry where you bring in some really awesome guest lecturers and you get young people excited for chemistry, or at least you do your best. And then if they are interested in it, then they can continue pursuing chemistry to a deeper level. But requiring that everyone goes through a year of it, or requiring that everyone goes to a certain high level of math, or, I can go on and on here. Mm-hmm. I just feel like there are so many potentially missed opportunities for young people when their life is completely consumed by academics.
Yeah, we can both completely relate to that. And it's one of the things I think, like, travel for both of us was really good, almost like a deschooling experience where there was like a lot of lessons that you learned through, 20 years of school, if you could count college, that travel kind of helped us kind of break down, like, oh, learning is actually fun. It's not just a burden. It shouldn't just be about like some utility calculation. Like, it's actually enjoyable, and completely changing the way we thought about success as well, just having space to get away from the network we were in, where it was all about, having a credential, getting a status, getting promotion, making a certain amount of money. So
what is the definition of success that you two are operating on now?
Well, I don't know if I have a good definition of success in my mind, but I kind of view the point of my life as just to experience as wide of a range of experiences as I possibly can. And success to me is just kind of like pushing things as far as I can push them, which is a little bit vague, but
it's quite vague.
Yeah, doing the things I want and the things I like to do as best as I can do them, and as much as I could do them.
Yeah, and I think for me, like, coming from a standard schooling background and then going through and getting a business degree when I was 22 and graduated college, I defined success as getting a good job with a good title and getting paid a good yearly salary. And then after traveling and breaking away from that, I defined success as doing something that makes me happy. So it doesn't matter if I make $1 million a year doing that, or if I make $50,000 a year, it's, am I doing something that makes me happy, that allows me to live a life where I have balance between work and the things that I love to do? Or, what I do right now, I love to do that. So it's like work isn't really even a thing. It's like work is the stuff I love. And I think that's being successful.
Yeah, I feel like, and you can look at someone, and I think almost that, like a deep enjoyment of being alive is like almost the thing I would define as success. Like, you can look at someone who's doing anything really, and if they still feel like really passionate about it and they feel alive because of it, then I think that would be kind of what I consider success.
Yeah, I'm totally with both of you.
Do you feel like your education experience, because you went through a very conventional education experience and now your views have shifted, what were the big kind of aha moments where you saw, I don't know if I want to use the word took issue, but like could look back at your own experience and say, like, no, this isn't the best way to do this?
I had a pretty clear aha moment halfway through college. I was studying astronomy and physics, and had this vague notion of becoming a research scientist or maybe becoming a high school science teacher. And then a friend handed me this book by John Taylor Gatto, who's this New York City public school teacher who taught for 30 years and won all these awards for doing cool stuff, getting kids out of the classroom, doing projects, independent study. And then he quit teaching after he won Teacher of the Year award in New York City and New York State in 1991. And he said he didn't want to make a living hurting kids anymore. And I read this book that he wrote called A Different Kind of Teacher, and I was just completely blown away. And this whole notion of becoming a high school science teacher quickly got washed away. I just realized that the public school system bureaucracy would probably crush my spirit. And I was also becoming pretty disillusioned with the research scientist path. I just saw all the grad students not having a very fun time spending 12 hours a day in front of their computers. And I wanted to be outside playing frisbee. And so that was a big turning point, aha moment. And I ended up designing my own major in alternative education and having the last 2 years of college be pretty much what I wanted to make of them. They were very self-directed. I got to choose all the classes that I took. I wrote a 40-page senior thesis paper. And so I sort of got to unschool college for a couple of years at the end there. And so that was a very meta experience to be self-directing college while studying self-directed learning. And that was definitely the biggest one right there.
Yeah, that sounds neat. Where did you do that program, you said?
I went to school at UC Berkeley near San Francisco.
Okay.
And they actually don't have a big program for designing your own major. I had to struggle to get the permission to do that, and eventually discovered this little tiny department called the individual major, and only 7 other undergraduates out of 20,000 were doing it.
Wow.
And it was in an office or a department. It was a filing cabinet in a woman's office.
Okay, yeah, I was asking because I'd never heard anything like that before, and I worked for the university in Calgary for a number of years. It's like, I've never heard any of that.
I've since discovered that there are a lot of design your own major programs at universities that you would not expect. And so you just have to dig around for them.
Yeah, I guess they make it like, it's not like they advertise that program because it's easier if students don't do that, but it's like there if people go in search of it on their own.
Yeah, and I had to get 2 professors to sign off on my idea, sign off on my plan. And so you still need to get some sort of institutional stamp of approval. But in the end, it wasn't that hard.
And what are sort of your views on, I guess, like the pros and cons of teenagers going to college now? Do you have a strong view on that?
Yeah. And I wrote a whole book about it called Better Than College, How to Build a Successful Life Without a 4-Year Degree. And some people hear that title and they think, okay, so he's anti-college. And that's not true. And I'd be very hypocritical if that was my point, because I had a really great experience in my 4.5 years in college. And I also took a sort of weird alternative path through college. But in general, I think that teenagers should go to college if they've made a really informed decision about it. And if they've looked at all their alternatives, including a lot of their alternatives that are not college at all, not just like, which of these top 5 schools on U.S. News and World Report should I go to? But what could I do with the time and money and energy that I'm going to be investing in college instead of it? Because college is not this mythical thing that you have to do as soon as you finish high school. You can take a gap year. You can take multiple gap years and go back to college, and you'll be fine. It might be a little bit weird because you're older than everyone else, but not that weird. And better than walking away from college with $100,000 in debt and no clear vision of how you spent your time there. That's something that I ended up taking away from college, was a pretty clear vision of what I wanted to get out of it and what I wanted to do after college. I think that was extremely worthwhile. I think it was worth the investment. I went to a public university that was still relatively inexpensive to do that. I don't know if I would have made the same decisions if I was going to like a private university that costs $30,000 to $50,000 a year. So it's complicated. There's obviously no one right answer, but I think that the only way you can really screw it up is to just automatically go into college with extremely little research, because that's what you're expected to do, because that's the only way you think you can become successful. That's the only way to fuck it up.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
it's such a gigantic investment. Like when you consider investing 4 years of your life in anything, that's a massive investment. And then the money involved, especially in the US, also just a gigantic investment. And there's so much social pressure to go do it. It is funny how much pushback.
It's hard.
It's almost as if like everyone was like, if there was like a social like norm where, and I'm not saying this about college, where you like took $100,000 and you took it to like a bonfire in the middle of town and everyone burned it, and then you were like, okay, everyone stop, consider what you're doing with the money. And you're like, what are you talking about? Everyone who's successful has done this before.
You should run a Kickstarter for that, Ryan, and make it happen.
I'll give you loans to do it.
$100,000 bonfire.
But yeah, so this, looking back at our experience, we both finished 4 years at college and then immediately went and traveled for 6 months. And I know for me, that 6 months of travel where we went to Europe and Southeast Asia was way more formative in terms of like changing my life philosophy, changing what I wanted to get out of the next few years of my life, and connecting with things that I actually cared about than 4 years had been for me. By far in those core ways.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And something that I always find interesting about sort of like the college mindset is people are like, go to college and figure out what you want to do with your life. And like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I applied. And so I was like, okay, I'll do business because that makes sense. Like, I don't want to be a doctor. I don't want to be a lawyer. Like, I don't want to be a dentist or any of these things that have like specific roots. So like business is really general. I can learn all these different skills and I'll kind of like figure out my career path from there. But it's like you get into these degrees and there's so much structure in them. Like you can't just go and take whatever classes you want to take in something like that. You have to take like so many humanities and you have to take things like computer science and calculus and accounting. And there was so much of that I really didn't enjoy doing. And so I find it really interesting when people say like, you know, college is this environment where you're free to figure out what you want to do. Because for me, it really wasn't that experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even with my self-design major, I had to take all the core liberal arts classes. And in their defense, I think that there's a really important place for that kind of widespread liberal arts education. But I think that you need to be ready for it and you need to be hungry for it. Mm-hmm. And that so many young people come straight out of 12 years of formal schooling, especially those 4 years of high school where they are just in the meat grinder and do not have time to breathe and do not have time to genuinely form any interests or curiosities or any other forms of self-motivation that would lead you to wholeheartedly embrace this kind of liberal arts curriculum that's that's part of the package deal with most colleges. And so that's why I think gap years are such a powerful thing. Taking a year or two in between the high school and college years to essentially try to get that same experience that you two got right after finishing your degrees. But, you know, just shift that more forward and get away from formal academics. Take a breather. And so when you are ready to come back into this mode of focused academics, that you are doing it wholeheartedly. You're doing it consensually. You're not just feeling like this is something that I have to do or I should do. Those are just such debilitating words to be operating with in your mind. Because, you know, I'm really glad that I took a lot of those liberal art classes and some of them opened my eyes to all sorts of stuff that I wouldn't have known about before. I think the value of exposure is real and it's significant. But also, if you're forcing exposure down kids' throats, just like you force anything down anyone's throat, then you're going to get pushback and resistance. And it's not going to work out the way you think it's going to work out.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. All right, Blake, we want to be respectful of your time, so we'll let you go. But where should people go if they want to find out more about Unschool Adventures and more about your content in general?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the website. Let me Google that for you. And so in the spirit of that, just Google Unschool Adventures, or you can go to my website, which is BlakeBoles, BOLES.com. And there's links to all my writing and various projects and everything right there.
Amazing.
All right. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Ryan and Amanda.
To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at World Wanderers1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.